The movie begins with a lady playing something that looks like a cello in the middle of the night, but the cello seems to have just one string. The scene fades out. A young man sits on the balcony of a moat house, singing to the things in his surroundings. He picks up a flower that falls into the water and sings about it. A voice calls out from the house, addressing the man by the water as Sengrawi, Rawi for short. Rawi is informed that the Reverend Uncle is around. Before he receives full info about what's up, he stands up and runs into the house. The Reverend Uncle, dressed in a yellow monk dress and sporting a bald head, reprimands him for running like he's an 11-year-old. The Reverend Uncle brings an old friend, Parrot Sidikorn Khan. He wants to send Rawi to stay with Parrot for a while, saying it will be better for him and more comfortable. Rawi denies but is given no choice, as Parrot and the Reverend Uncle bombard him with reasons why it'll be okay for him to go. In light of his crippled argument, he receives blessings from the Reverend Uncle, who gives him a necklace saying it will protect him, and he should always keep it around. His welfare is now in the hands of Parit. A man reads the horoscope of a family whose child, Prof Loeng, has traveled to Thailand. The lady, running out of patience, asks when Loeng will be back, or will he be there forever? The priest informs them that he's about to clock 25. If there is no suspicious moment, auspicious event, then he'll be struck by misfortune and will be alone for life. The idea of an auspicious moment strikes harder than it should, because, right now, at this moment, Loeng is not betrothed to anyone. The parents are concerned and ask for an alternative if he doesn't marry before the time passes. The priest strongly encourages them to find him a soulmate and get married, stating also that Loeng's destiny has an odd number in age, not older than 25. He tells them that the soulmates will come, and they should not bother looking for any, as if soulmates fall from heaven. Rawi and Parrot arrive at his new and humble abode. Rawi's mind is blown to tiny pieces as he sees the stunning house he's about to start living in. As they arrive at the door, the priest and the couple whose son's horoscope he was reading come out and exchange pleasantries. Parrot introduces him, reminding them of his words saying he's bringing a young man along to stay with him. The lady escorts the priest to the gate. While walking, the priest hears voices asking him to stay out of it, telling him not to allow them to toy with the life of his grandchild. The woman notices the strange behavior of the priest and begins to try to ease him. The priest's name is Mr. Lee. He informs them that the things he warned them about should be done as soon as possible in order to alleviate the bad luck that will ensue if these things are not done. In a tense voice, she says she'll inform her father. Rawi pants heavily, and his heart also throbs as he wakes up from a nightmare of him walking through the woods with a candle, shaking like a leaf. He encounters a scary lady in the woods who tells him to leave. He picks up the necklace that the Reverend Uncle gave him and prays with it. Soon it is dawn. The couple informs Parrot about what Mr. Lee said, about Loeng tying his destiny to a soulmate, whose age is also an odd number, and not from Phra Nakhon. Parrot wastes no time in suggesting that the soulmate be Ra Wai, who's 21 at the moment. The question now is, will Ra Wai allow them to bind his destiny to that of Loeng? They divide labor in terms of favor. Parrot will inform and try to convince Ra Wai for the binding, while the lady will talk to Loeng. Parrot raises a very important question, asking the couple if they don't mind the fact that both Loeng and Rawi are men. It seems like the couple are backed up to a wall, having no other guns in their arsenal. They have no choice but to accept Rawi as Loeng's soulmate. They say that as long as it'll keep their son safe and out of misfortune's way, it's fine by them. The couple's names are Mr. Pachara and Mrs. Pimpala. The maids in the house discuss the arrival of Loeng. Rawi strolls into the kitchen and offers to help, but his kind gesture is truly appreciated, and he is sent back to wait at the dining table. They treat him like he's a pest in the kitchen. Pudsorn, the only male cook in the kitchen, reacts to the praises of Rawi that the ladies in the kitchen sing. On his way to get garlic for the cooks in the kitchen, he rides his bicycle and is hit by a car. He falls with his bike and gets a little bruise on his elbow. The driver rushes out and tries to help him while the person who's seated like a boss in the back seat just waits there. In his impatience, the little sense he has expires, and he steps out of the car to see what's going on. The man unapologetically yells at Rawi, saying he wants to end his own life. Being a fearless rural boy, Rawi does not hold back his words as he argues with the man about the speed his driver was driving at on a narrow path like this. They go their separate ways. We see the car that almost hits Rawi arrive at the Parrot mansion. It's no shock that the man whose car almost hits Rawi is Loeng. He walks into the house, and as he walks through the hallway, we see a figure standing at the end of the hallway for a second. Loeng, Parit, and his parents sit in the living room. They inform him about the reading of his horoscope and the fate that lies in store for him if he doesn't bind his destiny to another this year. He's also told that he'll be binding with Rawi. He questions their decision to bind him to a stranger, but later agrees, though he'll only stay in town for 6 months. Rawi and Parrot meet in the hallway. He brings Parrot a butterfly pea juice that the maids ask him to deliver. Parrot asks him if he has chosen a course to study, and also breaks the formality by asking Rawi to address him as Grandpa. Parrot lays down the nuclear bomb of a request with a brief explanation of the situation at hand. Loeng pops in before Grandpa can finish his request. Parrot asks them to get to know each other. Rawi is about to decline the offer, but Parrot encourages him to take a little more time to think about it. The two of them stand there amidst the tension of what happened on the road, as they listen to Parrot say he'd like Rawi to be a part of the family. Loeng holds Rawi by the wrist and takes him to his room, asking him to quit becoming his soulmate. Rawi initially hasn't agreed to be his soulmate, but Loeng tries to bring him into quitting the whole soulmate thing. Rawi bruises Loeng's ego, saying he also just found out about the soulmate thing and doesn't want any money. If he did, he'd ask Grandpa because he'll have a lot more than Loeng. Rawi storms out after saying he'd say yes to the binding just to spite Loeng. Later that night, Rawi has another nightmare of a lady playing the cello at night and wakes up panting. He quickly grabs the necklace the Reverend Uncle gave him and prays with it. Dawn breaks. Loeng compliments the flowers his mother was arranging as they sit in the living room. Rawi brings more flowers and gets pricked in the finger while picking them. Loeng makes a rude remark about it. Parrot and Mrs. Pimpala scold him for being rude to his soulmate. Parrot informs everyone that the auspicious time for the binding will be 9:09 a.m. on the 19th. Mrs. Pimpala will take care of the ceremony arrangements. Loeng wants to voice an opinion, but Parrot shuns him. The binding day arrives and Mr. Lee informs them that they have to live together from henceforth. If dusk breaks, and they are not under the same roof, one of them may suffer a fate as cruel as demise. Rawi smirks at Loeng, who's pissed at the whole idea of being bound to Rawi. They stretch forth their hands, and the priest ties a band around their wrists, one after the other. On their first night together, Loeng tells Rawi to return to his own room, but Rawi insists on not being the reason why something bad happens to the two of them. They both lay down, and Loeng tries to adjust Rawi out of the bed. They make a deal to be good to each other, and after 6 months, this soulmate ruse will come to an end. The next morning, the whole family gathers at the dining table and has a little family time. As per their agreement, Loeng is nice to Rawi. Rawi returns from shopping. This time he takes the car and the driver. Pudsorn is cleaning the windows upstairs. As Rawi approaches the door, a small flower vase falls and almost hits him on the head, but luckily, it misses. In the bid to dodge it, Rawi takes some damage to his knee. Loeng, the knight in shining armor, comes and carries Rawi in his arms. The driver looks around and sees Pudsorn cleaning the window. He accuses Pudsorn, but Pudsorn does not give any answer and just walks away. Rawi walks into the hallway and the lights begin to flicker. Engulfed by fear, he feels the presence of someone behind him. He turns around to look but sees nothing. He turns back and is frightened by a ghost. He stumbles backward and falls into the hands of Loeng. Scared out of his pants, he tells Loeng to help him. They head back to the room. Despite Rawi's reluctance, he allows Loeng to massage his feet. Loeng spots a mark on his foot and asks if he was born with it. He asks about another scar which Rawi says he got when he was a kid. Loeng goes to a drawer and pulls out a necklace, showing it to Rawi, who looks at it like he's just seen a long-lost relic. Loeng confesses that someone gave it to him when he was little. They look at each other like they just caught an epiphany. We're shown a flashback. Young Rawi is injured and young Loeng tends to the wound. When Loeng is about to leave, Rawi gives him the necklace. Back to the present, they both look so happy and shocked that they still got to see each other after so many years. They play a little in reference to something from the past. The next morning, Rawi wakes up and tries to prepare clothes for Loeng to wear to work. Loeng wakes up not long after and tells him to relax because of the injury on his leg. Loeng appreciates him for trying to help and says he'll have his chance to do so another time. He stands up and heads to prepare for work. Loeng, at work, seals a deal while Rawi waits patiently for his arrival, reminiscing on the moment they had in the morning. Mornings, noons, and nights pass, and it feels like their bond deepens with every passing moment. They get gifts for each other and spend time together hanging out. One day, Rawi casually strolls to the kitchen to say hello to the cooks. He asks if he could help, and this time, they let him lend a hand. Pudsorn says he doesn't want Rawi getting in the way of his duty of preparing the food. He has a little spat with the older lady sitting across from him. She orders him to leave the kitchen and let Rawi cook the food. Pudsorn calls Rawi and Puppet before getting up and leaving. Rawi is flooded with emotions and feels bad, but nonetheless, continues to make the meal. He gives the cook 2 bowls to present at dinner, one for Loeng and the other for the rest of the family. Rawi takes another plate and heads straight to Parrot, who's at the pavilion, as the cook said. He stands in front of Parrot as he tastes the food like he's in a food competition show, with no emotions on his face. One would think the meal is bad. Parrot asks if Rawi is the one who made the food and compliments it as a 10 out of 10. A heavy wind cuts their conversation short as the bowl of food falls on the floor. Rawi tries to pick the glass pieces from the ground and gets cut. Parrot runs to get help. At that moment, Loeng returns from work. He asks the first person he sees about Rawi and is told Rawi is in the garden. Loeng gets there and sees the driver helping Rawi tend to his wounds. Loeng gets jealous and sends the driver away. He acts all cranky until Parrot comes back with a maid and a first aid kit. Parrot tells the maid to put on the first aid bandages on Rawi. Parrot shuns Loeng and tells him not to argue with Rawi, who stayed in the kitchen all day cooking his favorite dessert. The family sits for dinner, complimenting the sweet food that Rawi cooked for them. Mr. Pachara informs Loeng and Rawi that Mrs. Pimpala, Parrot and he will be going on a business trip for 3 to 5 days. Parrot tells Loeng to take good care of Rawi. You do remember that he gave the cook an extra bowl to keep for Loeng. He told them to share that bowl with everyone in the family. It seems he is mad at Loeng. Later that night, Rawi is attacked by a spirit who proclaims her hatred for him. First, the ghost stands on his chest as he pants and gasps for air. Loeng, who is in another room, hears him panting and runs in to help Rawi. Loeng lets him settle, before asking him what happened. Rawi explains that he had a nightmare, and has been having these nightmares from time to time. Now that his mind is settled, he remembers that he's not on talking terms with Loeng, and decides to go back to sleep. But Loeng stops him and apologizes. Loeng and Rawi return to the Reverend Uncle to get another amulet necklace. It seems he has lost the first one he was given. The Reverend Uncle tells Rawi to be careful and take care of the amulet necklace. He also thanks Loeng for taking care of Rawi. He gives them what they need and dismisses them. Back at home, Loeng and Rawi stand in front of a xylophone. Loeng tells Rawi to give it a try. Rawi steps up and picks up the xylophone sticks. Loeng holds his hands from the back and they play together. Rawi picks up a poem, and before he gets to read one from inside the book, Loeng recites one. He asks if Rawi understands, but receives no answer. He moves like he wants to kiss Rawi. Rawi escapes using hunger as an excuse. A while after, Loeng and Rawi sit together reading a book. The ghost appears by the side of the house. The lights trip off and thunder sounds. Rawi is scared. Loeng tells him to wait there, but Rawi insists he follows, because he doesn't want to be left alone. They get to the door, open it, and are startled to see a maid there with a lamp. She gives them the lamp, and they head back to the bed. Rawi says the nightmares aren't nightmares, or, let's say, they don't feel like nightmares. They feel like the handiwork of something or someone that's not human. Loeng holds his hands and affirms that everything is going to be fine, and Mr. Lee will come around to check what's going on. They share a moment, look into each other's eyes, and kiss. Loeng asks that Rawi calls him Flowing, and they resume kissing. The next morning, Rawi is trying to make breakfast. Loeng goes to him and says he'll help since they're together and should be doing things together. Pudsorn sees them play their love through the opening at the door. Pudsorn goes into the garden and plays with the flowers. The driver comes out from where he was and says Loeng loves all his plants. Pudsorn, with his long face and tears in his eyes, says he always knew that Loeng would never choose him. But when he sees Loeng and Rawi together, it still hurts him. The driver offers him his handkerchief and his condolences. Pudsorn grabs the handkerchief and walks away. Loeng compliments the food that Rawi made and says it's too good and doesn't want to share it with anyone. Rawi tells Loeng that he has to take care of himself, just in case anything should happen to him. Loeng says he shouldn't say things like that he'll not let anything happen to him. In denial of one love, another love blossoms between the driver and the cook as they play with the hose and wet themselves. A neighbor's house catches fire. Rawi notices the people running around and calls Loeng's attention to it. They both step out, but Loeng tells Rawi to return back into the house. They hold hands for a brief second before Rawi runs back into the house. His amulet bangle falls off. Loeng picks it from the floor and, in a split second, contemplates if he should give it to him first, before attending to the neighbors. Back in the house, Rawi tries to call the firefighters, but the phone won't ring. He hears the voice of the ghost again, but this time it's clear. He's not going to escape today. His luck has run out. He turns around slowly, eerie sounds playing in the background, and the ghost runs right up to him and enters him. The driver and the cook meet a possessed Rawi standing in the hallway. He threatens them with a knife to get out of his way. They move away peacefully and let him pass. The cook and the driver quickly run to Loeng and tell him what they just witnessed in the hallway. He remembers that the amulet fell off Rawi and runs into the house to find his beloved. Possessed Rawi is walking through the woods, and as soon as he reaches a little water body in the woods, he begins to mumble some words, saying that her demise was caused by Chantkorn. The ghost makes him raise the knife and stab. The ghost forces him into the water. In the water, he sees visions of the ghost's memories where she argues with her husband, who accuses her of using tricks to convince the parents to wed them. This relationship seems to have broken before it even started, but the lady is willing to force it at all costs. Rawi reappears in the garden where the man she calls a thief. Her husband intervenes, and she calls out her husband's name, Parrot. The woman loves her husband, but the man loves his fellow man, and this irritates the woman to the core. She plans to assassinate the man her husband loves, but fate takes a twist, and the knife she took to assassinate the man stabs her instead. In the midst of that struggle, they fall into the water, and that's how she lost her life. Back to real life, Loeng runs to the water and dives in without a second thought. He pulls out Rawi and performs CPR, but nothing happens. Out of nowhere comes Mr. Pachara, Mrs. Pimpala, Parrot, and Uncle Reverend. Loeng feels a force pulling his head. Before he panics, the Reverend tells him to keep his cool and that he'll speak to the spirit. The name of the spirit is Kanika. It is revealed that Kanika, the spirit of Parrot's wife, wants revenge on the Reverend Uncle, who is the man Parrot had an affair with, leading to Kanika's demise. It's just like history repeating itself. Parrot regrets his actions and says out loud that a day doesn't pass by, that he doesn't feel bad that his actions took the life of his wife, and that he has always known her spirit looms around the house. Kanika's son, Mr. Pachara, pleads with the spirit of his deceased mother and tells her how much he loves her. He explains that Rawi isn't part of this tragedy and she should let him go. Loeng also puts in a few words, apologizing and advocating for Rawi and pleading for his life. Rawi, who was stabbed a few minutes ago, fell into water and was saved, lies on the floor for almost 10 minutes, and comes back to life. The next morning, Rawi wakes up to Loeng next to him. Loeng worries if he feels much pain. Logically, this guy shouldn't be alive. The whole family rushes in to greet him. A cleansing ritual takes place, and the spirit of Kanika is put to rest. Loeng and Rawi walk through the woods by the riverside. They appreciate each other, and Loeng pulls out a family ring and offers it to Rawi. Rawi is very shy. He finally whispers the 3 magic words into Loeng's ear.